Welcome to this webinar on embedding the implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions in the United Nations Cooperation Frameworks, status, developments and perspectives on the way forward. My name is Juliette Voynov-Kohler. I'm from the BRS Secretariat, and I'm joined with for this webinar by three panelists. And the idea of this webinar is really built on the premise that the implementation of the three conventions will be strengthened if the action taken by parties is embedded in broader sustainable development efforts. So you will hear some perspectives on the interlinkages between achieving the SDGs and the BRS conventions, and on the steps that can be taken to ensure that action at the national level is mutually reinforcing. To start with and to set the scene, a brief word about what you will hear today. We have three panelists, as I mentioned. The first one is Ms. Cecilia Lopez y Royo, who's the head of the Development Coordination Unit of the Policy and Program Division of UNEP. Welcome, Cecilia. Many thanks for joining us. I know we're just a couple weeks away from UNIA 7, and I can imagine just how busy you are. You will be making a presentation entitled Briefing on Mainstreaming of Pollution Action and MEAs in Country Frameworks, Findings and Approaches to Strengthen its Uptake. We will then hear from work under the Basel and Rotterdam Conventions, starting with Ms. Marilyn Beau, Program Officer, Head of the Legal and Policy Unit in the Governance Branch of the BRS Secretariat. In the context of the BRS Convention, it is the Basel Convention, and more specifically through the work of its Implementation and Compliance Committee, that first efforts to explore the interlinkages between implementation of the Convention and the cooperation frameworks was done. So we will hear information on the work done by the ACC, on the work also done by the COP itself to support parties' efforts. Finally, our third panelist, Yvonne Iwan, who's a legal officer in the governance branch of the BRS Secretariat, will present the work of the Rotterdam Convention Compliance Committee that is relevant to this integration in cooperation frameworks. We hope to then have about 10 minutes for a Q&A, and I will then explain how attendees can ask for the floor and ask a question. This webinar is recorded, and we will post the presentations on our website following its closing. A word about what's happening under the Stockholm Convention, since you will be hearing about Rotterdam and Basel, but not so much about Stockholm. And this is just because the work of the Compliance Committee under the Stockholm Convention has just been initiated. So for now, we will have the inaugural meeting of the committee next week, and whether the committee embarks in similar work under its next work program is yet to be seen. With this, I'm happy to hand over the floor to Cecilia. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you today, and a special thanks to, of course, Juliette, Marilyn, and Yvonne for inviting us to join this interesting conversation today. So, as Juliette mentioned, I'll be sharing a few insights from the review of cooperation frameworks that UNEP undertakes annually in terms of what does climate, nature, and pollution look like in sustainable development cooperation frameworks. I'm going to zoom in, of course, a little bit closer into the pollution aspects and to any references to the BRS conventions and its commitments. So allow me to, I'm familiar with the system, apologies for that, but I think I'm sharing my screen. Please tell me if I'm not. Great. Full screen. Great, I hope you can see it now. Great. So as I mentioned, we have been undertaking this review of cooperation. The purpose of this presentation today is really to share with you these insights from the review of sustainable development cooperation frameworks, which are, there's a set of country-level cooperation frameworks that are adopted every year. And when we have looked into what climate, nature, and pollution, and the subset of information that can be below that looks like in UN country planning and programming. And the reason we've been looking at that in UNEP is really to try and have an evidence basis on which can help us inform how we engage, well, of course, with the resident coordinator system, as how to strengthen. So how specific can we be with the resident coordinators and with the UN country teams in terms of, for instance, perhaps challenges or priorities that might have been overlooked by the UN country team. It can also have served as well in terms of thinking, okay, what are the thematic areas that deserve a little bit of strength and advocacy when we speak to the resident coordinators and the UN country teams, and what are the aspects that in a specific context could benefit from being threaded out a little bit in the context of the priorities that the cooperation framework look into. So, and I think I'm going to manage to this slide. So one aspect that while we go through, and I wanted to take a little bit of a step back in terms of why cooperation frameworks, why we've been looking at cooperation frameworks specifically, because of course, as you may know, the cooperation framework are the agreement between the government and the UN system at the country level. It encompasses a series of priorities that are discussed and agreed on by all parties. Excuse me. One of the things that we also have looked at, and you may have heard of, or you may have seen in the context of the recent developments around UN80. UN80 has proposed many changes that range from, a review of the mandates, to efficiencies, to of course then realignment also of the UN system and how it collectively then supports work at the country level. Within the different changes that are proposed, whether it's mergers, whether it's regional resets and so on, there's two clear messages that come across in terms of the UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. One of them is they're here to stay. They will continue being the most important planning and programming document for the support the UN provides at the country level. And the second aspect that has been highlighted is the resident coordinator system will be strengthened. So when we think about how also we plan about plans for the future, keeping in mind that those two aspects, of course, has then helped us inform some of the aspects that we'll be working on or we're planning to do in the next few years. Within the context of the UN cooperation frameworks, important to note perhaps in the context of this discussion is that resident coordinators have been paying attention to the multilateral environmental agreements, and the UN system annually reports back to ECOSOC on how the cooperation frameworks integrate actions to implement multilateral environmental agreements. So whereas resident coordinators do have to cover every single topic that the UN system is working on, there has been a specific attention to trying to bring together all the different information under the multilateral environmental agreements as a whole. And you will see some of this information as we go through the presentation. This set back to the analysis that UNEP undertakes on an annual basis on the uptake of climate, nature, and pollution. So at this stage, we have reviewed 80 cooperation frameworks. So we've analyzed 80 on more or less 30 cooperation frameworks per year as they get adopted. For your reference, the UN country teams are 132. So it is not complete, but it is envisaged that we will complete all 130 by end of this year, should you be interested in more information around the countries covered. So on this map, you will see which countries have been covered through this analysis. So the first level of insight, and I did want to take the opportunity to look at all three pillars of climate change, nature, and pollution, just for you also to see some of the differences in the uptake across countries and across cooperation frameworks. So as you can see, traditionally, climate change has seen a very strong uptake across most, so 89% of cooperation frameworks include actions around climate change. And there's many reasons for that, including the fact that there's been a very strong the UN system has been really strongly brought together around the topic of the climate change, around the NDCs, and so on. A little bit less so in terms of the nature commitments around nature or pollution, as you can see. So pollution being the one that has seen traditionally the most limited uptake in cooperation frameworks, which only 15% of the countries that we have cooperation frameworks that we have reviewed integrate specific actions around pollution. And I think it's always interesting to see the comparison between the three beyond the one pillar, because we can also learn from, of course, the neighboring topics of climate change and nature. Well, this is the consolidated view I just gave you over the 80 cooperation frameworks. And I think it's important to note also that there has been an evolution over time, and a very positive evolution over time, I would say, especially for the actions around nature and around pollution, which have seen a significant increase over the last 3 years in their uptake. And this, again, is probably due to a number of factors, including things like the adoption of the Global Biodiversity Framework on the one hand, but also, of course, there is an increased awareness also for the last 4 years of the gaps that we might have faced in terms of the uptake of pollution. And behind that has informed also some of the work and some of the advocacy with the UN country teams and the resident coordinators, as I mentioned earlier. Moving a little bit perhaps closer to the multilateral environmental agreements and their uptake, as I mentioned, there is a specific indicator on which resident coordinators and country teams are assessed on a yearly basis, and that really looks at the integration of actions on the implementation of multilateral environmental agreements. This indicator is split into subdivided into 3 groups of multilateral environmental agreements, and you can see it's on the one hand there's the NDCs, the second one is the NBSUPs, and the third one is other multilateral environmental agreement, which we are working on to make sure it gets unpacked, because that, of course, includes all of the pollution-related conventions, but of course also the one on desertification and so on. The interesting thing in this review is that well, of course, as you can see, similarly to the uptake of climate, the NDCs are the ones that are referenced the most. They have also been covered by multiple ministries in many cases, and that is probably one of the reasons that we see them further high up. But the consideration to all 3 multilateral environmental agreements is fairly limited across the cooperation frameworks, and really gave us an indication also in terms of, again, the type of information, the type of awareness, and the type of advocacy we'd like to see. If we break this down into a little bit of more than just other multilateral environmental agreements, here we will see basically the breakdown across the 80 countries. So specific references to pollution-related MEAs have only been made in 4 out of the 80 cooperation frameworks. And we'll look at it a little bit more closely. So for your further detail, this slide doesn't necessarily look very pretty, but to give you an idea about what type of language and what type of text and how we can refer back to the Basel, Rotterdam and Stockholm Conventions, where necessary, this is language extracted from each one of the 4 cooperation frameworks that make specific references to the work that to the commitments and the work that is being done under these conventions. So as you will see, it's primarily at the indicator level, which is possibly the most useful level, because it helps direct much of the work beyond specific initiatives tied to the convention, and really looks at bringing the whole of the UN system towards these type of results, independently of the type of project, initiative, or UN entity in essence. So interesting to keep in mind. And that's a little bit concludes the part of looking at what do we see in the cooperation frameworks, and where can we tend to start a thinking and a discussion around where we can take it next over the next few years, knowing that, again, both the cooperation frameworks and the resident coordinator system are going to be strengthened and will continue to be the main reference, main planning and programming document at the country level of the UN system. And perhaps one reflection also around the type of work that the UNEP is engaged in. We just wanted to share that beyond, of course, looking at all 3 pillars of climate, nature, and pollution, in the upcoming program of work that will be on the table for decision in the next couple of weeks at UNEA, there are specific indicators in the context of the next program of work around the uptake of environment in to UN planning, therefore the cooperation frameworks, as well as drawing to UN action that delivers on environmental priorities within the UN system at the country level. And I think the reason I'm sharing this is also because then, of course, that brings us to, if we were able to connect the dots and be able to bring all of this information together, whether that's the work that is being done under the conventions or under specific projects that are being implemented within UNEP or within other initiatives that are being delivered across the UN system, then of course that will help us to move the system towards more integrated action around environmental priorities. So again, just in conclusion, just 4 ideas for you to keep in mind, and we'll be happy to hear your feedback on any of these. But of course, there's many ways also in consideration of this of the upcoming medium-term strategy and program of work of UNEP in which we can work together to make sure that the information is connected. A lot of what we hear from resident coordinators is, can you help us, you as in the broader UN system community at the country level, connect the information, connect the commitments, connect the efforts that are already ongoing so that we make sure that these can be leveraged at its best. And I think I'll leave it at that, Juliette, and hand it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia. I think I will take it from there for the next presentation. Let me show my screen. All right, I hope you can see my screen properly. So yeah, thank you so much again, Cecilia, for your presentation. That was very interesting, highlighting the work of UNEP to review indeed how the environment is taken up in cooperation frameworks. Now we'd like to dive into the work that is undertaken under the Basel Convention to support parties as well as UN country teams to integrate needs under the Basel Convention into cooperation frameworks. So I would like in particular, of course, to highlight the work that was undertaken under the Implementation and Compliance Committee of the Basel Convention. As you may know, the Implementation and Compliance Committee, the ICC, has the objective to assist parties to comply with their obligations under the Convention and to facilitate, promote, monitor, and aim to secure the implementation and compliance with the obligations under the Convention. So with this general objective in mind, the committee has 2 tracks of work, the specific submission track and the review of general issues of compliance and implementation track. And in this general review mandate track, the committee looks at different issues, different areas of the convention, and one of them is the integration of needs under the Basel Convention into UN Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks. So this area has been included in the committee's program of work in 3 programs of work for the period 22-23, 24-25, and the current program of work of the committee for 26-27. So the mandate that the committee has with regard to cooperation framework is to monitor so UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework processes with a view to assessing the extent of which parties with national reporting needs are including actions to address those needs in their cooperation frameworks, also with the view of identifying best practices. And on the basis of this assessment, the committee is to prepare recommendations for the COP consideration. During its program of work 22-23, 24-25, the committee was also tasked to provide guidance on how individual parties can integrate action to address their needs into their cooperation frameworks. And in fulfillment of this mandate, the committee has developed a guidance document to assist parties to do this endeavor, to address their needs under the Basel Convention through the integration of actions in cooperation frameworks. So such a guidance was developed by the Compliance Committee and was adopted by the Conference of the Parties at its 17th meeting last May. This guidance was developed also on the observation that national reporting is still a challenge for some parties, and the cooperation frameworks can be a vehicle, a tool for those parties with national reporting challenges to address their needs. As we have seen from Cecilia's presentation, cooperation frameworks do not have yet pollution or BRS conventions as a main pillar. Therefore, there is an opportunity, let's say, to assist parties in further reflecting their needs in cooperation frameworks. So the objective with the guidance is indeed to help parties to address their needs, but also to support UN country teams and parties to incorporate the implementation of the Basel Convention and overall also waste management into common country analysis, CCA, and cooperation frameworks. So the guidance has been drafted for parties as well as resident coordinators and UN country teams. So this slide just provides some insights about the contributions, the links of the Basel Convention with the SDGs. As you know, the Basel Convention controls the transborder movement and the disposal of hazardous waste and other waste. So given its broad scope, the implementation of the convention contributes to many of the SDGs. The direct link is, of course, with the SDG number 12, in particular target 12.4 and associated indicators. But the convention in general also contributes to many other SDG targets. So the guidance document that was developed on how to integrate needs under the convention into cooperation frameworks puts forward a number of activities or measures that can be undertaken in this objective. As you can see on the slide, this is the number of entry points that can be considered by UN country teams and parties in doing this exercise of integrating their needs into cooperation framework. So we'll go through those measures quickly. So the first step when doing this work of integrating the needs of the convention into cooperation framework is done during the consultation with stakeholders. So the cooperation frameworks is inclusive, is a partnership done between the governments as well as stakeholders with the UN development systems. So it recognizes the importance of having a stakeholders' participation in the preparation of the country frameworks. There are several tools to do that. For example, countries and UN country teams can, for example, establish a steering committee In that case, it would be recommended to involve the Basel Convention focal point in the steering committee at the outset. Now, during the preparation of the cooperation frameworks, the UNCTs and parties may also wish to consider involving, well, the competent authority, of course, the focal point of the Basel Convention, as well as also the different actors that are active in the waste management sector. Different means of engagement can be considered, so this is all explained in the guidance document. The other important tool in the preparation of the cooperation frameworks is the common country analysis, which reflects the UN system independent, impartial, and collective assessment and analysis of a country situation in the development of a cooperation framework. And so in preparing this CCA, the guidance document offers a number of tools to assist with the assessment of the status or the level of implementation of the convention in the country. So, for example, several questions can be asked and assessed. For example, are the provisions of the convention transposed into national legislation? And this can be informed by the checklist for the legislator that is available under the Basel Convention. For example, that can be a tool that can be used to assess the level of domestication. Also, questions regarding to the transmission of national reports can be also asked in this phase of the preparation of the cooperation framework, and also information about country contacts. So if there are gaps that are being identified with the implementation of the Basel Convention, but overall on waste management issues, those should be described and outlined in the CCA. And so gaps, the guidance provides for some pointers to, for example, possible gaps that could be observed regarding the implementation of the Convention or waste management in general. But it is very important to have the gaps and the included in the CCA because this will ensure that the commitments of the parties are well reflected early on in the process for developing the cooperation frameworks. So once the first step is done, the CCA, then the process offers a possibility also to include elements, pathway for change related to the implementation of the Basel Convention and waste management in general in the theory of change. So the cooperation framework includes such a step whereby there will be a section that explains indeed what drivers or what pathways will be explored to achieve the priorities of the cooperation frameworks. And so the guidance here also lists a number of recommendations or suggestions to assist the UNCTs and parties to also include waste-related actions in the theory of change of the cooperation framework. The next step of the cooperation framework preparation is the identification of strategic priorities. So not all the development issues will be addressed in the framework of the cooperation frameworks. Therefore, it is important that there is a priority setting as to which priorities would be better addressed by the UN development systems. So during this strategic priority setting, the guidance helps to identify how waste management, waste generation, or pollution control can also link up to other broader strategic development priorities. So in that section of the guidance, you will find, for example, how waste management or Basel Convention implementation relates to poverty reduction, healthcare, education, economic growth, and environmental protection. So this also gives some ideas, some suggestions as to how to integrate this into strategic priorities of the cooperation framework. The guidance also touches upon the other elements of the cooperation frameworks, which are the outcomes, the outputs, and the indicators. So such elements have to be also elaborated and described in the cooperation frameworks. So similar to previous steps, the guidance document helps to suggest or consider what outcomes could be considered on waste management, and what outputs also could be included in cooperation frameworks. So those are also quite useful guidance for parties to consider in preparing their cooperation frameworks. On the matter of indicators, so cooperation frameworks try to a maximum to align with the SDGs indicators. So the guidance also then tries to derive from the SDGs indicators to see how the Basel Convention can support the achievement of those indicators. For example, here you see two SDGs indicators, 11.6.1 and 12.4.1. And you can see how the Basel Convention can contribute to the information of those indicators. Another important step of the cooperation frameworks is also to identify funding sources for its implementation, and in general for the attainment of the SDGs. And so the guidance document in that regard offers a landscape of the funding sources that exist for the Basel Convention and waste management in general, that can be considered when preparing or mainstreaming needs under the Basel Convention in cooperation frameworks. And finally, an important part is also of the cooperation framework is, of course, evaluation and monitoring. And there as well, guidance identifies which tools, which mechanisms are already in place to help monitor and evaluate the implementation of the cooperation frameworks as it relates to waste management and Basel Convention implementation. So in conclusion, it is very important indeed that the provisions of the Basel Convention are mainstream into cooperation framework because it allows for comprehensive and effective waste management strategies which are aligned with the SDGs and 2030 agenda. So with that, I would like then to also highlight building on the work that was done by the committee. I wanted to highlight a bit what the COP of the Basel Convention had adopted as decision on the matter of cooperation frameworks. So in addition to adopting the guidance document, the COP also formulated a number of requests to the Secretariat and also encouragements to UN cities. For example, the COP encouraged UN cities to include parties' obligation to transmit national reports in common country analysis in order to inform the development of cooperation frameworks. So this is paragraph 2. It also encourages parties that are responsible for the implementation of the convention to communicate at the national level with the entities that are responsible for the development of the cooperation frameworks, as well in order to increase the involvement in those processes. And it further encourages parties that have reporting challenges to include actions to address their needs in cooperation frameworks. So in conclusion, you can see indeed that the COP considers the matter of mainstreaming needs under the convention in cooperation framework as an important avenue for addressing those needs. And the work is going ahead. I mean, looking ahead, as mentioned before, the Implementation and Compliance Committee is continuing to review and monitor the work on cooperation frameworks as a possible way to assist parties with their national reporting obligations. And so a report will be prepared for consideration by the next meeting of the committee, who will then formulate a number of recommendations for further consideration by the Conference of the Parties at its next meeting in 2027. So the work on the cooperation frameworks is still very high on the agenda of the convention. So with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and would then hand over to my colleague Yvonne, who will present the work on cooperation frameworks in the framework of the Rotterdam Convention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. And yes, last but hopefully not least. So let me just bring up, I have a very brief presentation just to close us off for this afternoon. The Rotterdam Convention also has a compliance committee that has been working on the issue of integrating actions into the cooperation frameworks. It's not quite as dense, let's say, as the work that has been done in a lot of detail under the Basel Convention. The Rotterdam Convention Committee is a bit younger. It has been working since 2004, but there has still been a recognition of the importance of this issue by the COP and also by the committee itself. So, like in the context of the Basel Convention and the reporting, improved implementation of the Rotterdam Convention also contributes to achieving many, if not all, of the SDGs. There we've highlighted in particular the SDG 12 with the target 12.4 and its related indicator, but there are, for example, the SDG 2, which refers to ending hunger, achieving food security and improved nutrition, and promoting sustainable agriculture, which is very much linked to the control of international trade under the Rotterdam Convention. So this is a very important and interlinked issue. So what is the committee and what is it doing? It has a dual prong to its mandate. One part of which is looking at or reviewing systemic issues of general compliance to all parties under the convention. And for a number of years under its work program, it's had activities related to information submission. That's been in its program of work since the committee started working in 2022. It remains on the program of work for the upcoming biennium and has been recognized as an issue of common interest with the Basel Convention Committee. So initially, the Rotterdam Committee was asked to monitor the cooperation framework processes with a view to assessing the extent to which parties with information submission needs are including those in their cooperation frameworks, identifying best practices and developing recommendations. Now, the difference with the mandate compared to the mandate currently under the Basel Convention is looking at, rather than reporting needs in this context, we're looking at information submission needs. So what is the information that we exchange under the Rotterdam Convention? A key element of the Rotterdam Convention is the information exchange mechanism that then allows for shared responsibility and informed decisions in international trade of certain chemicals. Within that context, parties have an obligation to transmit what we call import responses. So there are a number of chemicals that are listed in Annex 3 to the Convention, and this is the basis for this control procedure, this prior informed consent procedure. So parties within a certain time frame send to the Secretariat and exchange information about their decisions of whether or not they consent to future import of these chemicals. And that can be with or without conditions. Information exchanged also includes notifications of final regulatory action, which are information about bans or severe restrictions of chemicals for human health and environmental reasons. There is also information exchanged when exporting a chemical that is banned or severely restricted, but that isn't listed in Annex 3. The idea being that there is an informed element of trade going on between parties, and whatever information has been identified by one party is then shared, including any information about risks with other parties involved in trade. And then accompanying these chemicals when they move across borders is a number of different sets of information. So we have harmonized systems codes, labeling requirements, safety data sheets, and so on. So it's quite embedded in a number of other systems that you can find that relate to these chemicals, and just looking in general at protecting human health and the environment when managing these chemicals. So the committee, in the evolution of its work, as I say, the work has been going on for a number of years, but is still relatively new. At its first meeting, so the committee started working in 2021, and it had its first meeting that included a convention-specific session, but also a joint session with the Implementation and Compliance Committee of the Basel Convention, because they had this is a common issue on both of their programs of work. They shared the context to what they were doing, information about their activities, and the different mandates. At that time, the ICC was at the point of circulating a questionnaire to collect information, and there was some discussion within Rotterdam context of whether to take a similar approach. However, because the committee was still relatively young, they decided not to circulate a questionnaire, but rather to monitor developments at that point in time, but still that there would be this information sharing. So really an initiation of the cooperation that has led to us working all together, and you see all of the team here presenting to you today. Within the committees, the Basel Convention Committee shared the outcomes of its questionnaires with the Rotterdam Committee, which then agreed to include further work and invite to continue sharing the outcomes of the Basel Convention activities. So in terms of where we're going next in a Rotterdam context, there will be a report to the next meeting of the Conference of the Parties in 2027. In the meantime, the committee is continuing to look around and see what is being done in relation to this integration of information submission needs, and in particular with the interlinkages with in relation to the Rotterdam Convention. So with the aim ultimately of improving timely and complete information submission of information as set out and required under the convention, and thereby as a knock-on effect, improving implementation of the convention, and also working towards achievement of sustainable development in the wider sense. So with that, I will close off from my presentation and hand back to Juliette. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia, Marilyn, and even for your presentations. I can't believe it. You're right on the mark when it comes to the timing for the session. So kudos for that. Normally a moderator has to chase speakers, but you were just perfectly on time, which leaves us with a couple minutes if there are some questions from the attendees.